So a really quite big Warhammer 40k points drop today. Imperial army units added to the Munitorum Field Manual, so let's see what's here and what's gone, and how much our Astra tanks, Taunar Supremacy armour and Gargantuan Squiggoths are going to be costing. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today we're talking about the updates to the Warhammer 40k Munitorum Field Manual, where Games Workshop has just let a whole load of points costs drop. Interestingly, these ones coming out for unreleased datasheets from Forge World indexes, at least at time of recording. There's really quite a lot of useful stuff here, including some confirmation as to what has and hasn't gone to Legends. Really quite interesting for the Imperium, and particularly the Imperial Guard, Custodes and Knights, and also plenty of Xenos. I'm sure at some point Games Workshop will announce the points updates, but at the moment they've kind of done this as a stealth update to the Munitorum Field Manual. Nothing listed yet in terms of datasheet downloads or any sort of publicity to say that the points are there, though I guess this will follow in time, probably when they actually release the datasheets. Obviously interpretation of these is kind of limited until we actually know the datasheet values. As mentioned in my previous video, quite a lot of Custodes things have been leaked from the app source code, so for those ones we can at least put them in a bit of context. A few things are looking rather good. As mentioned yesterday, really quite a lot of things from Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines have gone to Legends. Their sections are looking very bare for the Forge World points now. Most of the Imperial Guard and Xenos stuff remains though they have all taken a few casualties, presumably the removed units having gone to Legends. Let's go through the armies one by one and talk through each faction's Forge World points. First up, we've got the Space Marines, which are literally just 2 datasheets. Kind of crazy considering just how many Forge World options they had before the big purge. Basically all the heresy things and all the unique Forge World characters all appear to have either gone to Legends or just got no rules whatsoever. The only 2 entries here are the Astrius and the Thunderhawk gunship. The Astrius kind of makes sense, as they certainly couldn't brush that off as a heresy era thing, as it's very much a Primaris super heavy. And the Thunderhawk gunship would be kind of sad if they removed it. That's a pretty integral part to Space Marine lore. The Astrius has gone down by 25 points, so 525 points for that big tank, and the Thunderhawk's up a bit to 840. As per yesterday, a ridiculous amount of fairly popular Space Marine datasheets have gone to Legends, Relic Contemptors, Leviathans and Derrideos. All the other fancy Forge World tank options, like the Whirlwind Scorpius and the Vindicator Laser Destroyer, plus the aircraft variants. And weirdly enough, these things have datasheets but not points costs yet, so you can currently use their rules, but I'd guess that their points are probably going to come in some sort of Warhammer Legends update in the future. I feel like a lot of people are greatly going to miss a bunch of the Forge World special characters as well, units like Rael'th Ashmantle, Red Scorpions and Minotaurs characters, and Tyberos the Red Wake of the Carcharodons. I guess the Space Marine line is already very bloated between the Primaris and Firstborn ranges all layered on top of each other with like 120 plus datasheets in their index, but still losing all the Forge World things has been a massive cull in datasheets, at least from the competitive game. I'll certainly be interested to take a look at the Astrius' new stats. Hopefully when we get datasheets I'll do a review of that. Otherwise we've got Titans, which again we don't have the datasheets for yet, and it appears that Forge World's biggest and fanciest models, the Titans, have all come down in points by quite a bit. The Warlord's 3,500, the other 2 are just over 2,000, and the Warhound might actually be a credible proposition that you might be able to run in 2,000 point games somewhat efficiently. Obviously completely datasheet dependent, and it's still 1,100 points, so it's very much going to be 1 Titan and support staff, but it's a bit more plausible than having it literally 2,000 points and be your entire army in 1 model at Strike Force. Will be interesting to see how that guy's getting on as well. Otherwise for the Imperium, I feel like one of the most interesting changes here are the Custodes changes, perhaps not least because they had a whole bunch of their datasheets and rules leak. I covered them in the last video here on the channel. Some resourceful people have gone through the 40k app code and mined a whole bunch of weapon profiles and unit abilities for these units, so given that we know the generic Custodes stat lines, we have a fairly good idea as to how powerful they're going to be in game and put these points costs in a bit more context. Custodes certainly are one of the bigger and more important of these Forge World point sections. About half of their army is in Forge World at the moment. Hopefully a few of these might get translated to plastic kits at some point along the line. Out of these, the Caladius is 215 points. I feel like given the fairly general purpose and high strength anti-tank firepower that we saw for it the other day, I feel like this is looking really quite nice. Wouldn't be too surprised if Custodes armies run a fair few of those. The Sagittarium Custodes basically have a heavy bolter that you can fire on a 2+ and devastating wounds once per game. Maybe not too bad to hold down a home field objective perhaps, but I feel like overall probably your standard Custodes are going to be more interesting. Those Guardian Spears do look very threatening indeed at strength 7 and damage 2, particularly with the 5 attacks. The Telamon Heavy Dreadnought has come down a bit. He is 235 points now, and he's going to retain his -1 damage. I'd guess he'd probably be losing that Feel No Pain type save though, and his weapons do seem to be a bit less punchy than they were. The Venatari Custodians, the one with the jump packs, they are very expensive at 80 points each, something I must admit I was kind of expecting given their profiles. Much faster than standard on foot Custodians, and also get the Lance keyword on their Guardian Spear equivalents. Given that jump infantry just interacts really nicely with terrain, I still probably think they're not unplayable, but I feel like they're also not something that's going to carry your army in terms of damage and defense in terms of these points costs. The unique Contemptors seem to be doing okay, perhaps particularly the Contemptor Achilles at 155 points. That gets damage d6 plus 1 melee on its Warblade now. Still very scary in combat, and really not bad at that price tag I suspect. The Aquilon Terminators are significantly more than the Alaris ones. I feel like that's probably not going to match up too well for them, seeing as the Alaris seem kind of fine. I suppose they could be potentially one of the highest value models that you could resurrect with that Revive a Custodian stratagem though. Maybe them and the Venatari now. Finally, the Palace has got a whole bunch of strength 5 shots with devastating wounds. The firepower does seem general purpose, and it does look quite fast. At 120 points though, I can't help but think that people might prefer the Caladius over that. Still seems a little bit niche and paying for being an individual unit with fast movement. For the Imperial Guard, it looks like a few datasheets have been removed. For some of the most notable ones, it looks like the Death Corps Engineers squad is gone. That's kind of sad with them dropping in with their shotguns, they were kind of fun. Looks like the gradual slow burnout of the Forge World Death Corps Krieg line is still ongoing. Quad launchers and the mortar batteries look like they've been removed. The Thunder isn't listed, with its fairly focused Demolisher tank cannon firepower, and also the Vendetta gunship is gone as well. Maybe not too unsurprising, seeing as they said that they were removing the kit from the Forge World sales. Looks like the Vulture is still there though, that's up at 225 points. A lot of the rest of the miniatures have just had their points tweaked up and down a bit. Hard to interpret that too much really without the actual datasheets. Death Riders look like they're fairly cheap at just under 15 points per model. The Earthshaker and Medusa carriage batteries both are kind of interesting with how cheap they are. 70 points for the Earthshaker and 65 for the Medusa. I think I saw somewhere that someone had posted that they hit on 5s rather than 4s, so wouldn't be quite as punchy as the Basilisk and things. Could still be kind of interesting though with all the artillery synergies that Guard can bring. Otherwise, Rapier laser destroyers look kind of interesting. 30 points each now. It'll be interesting to weigh those up against things like those field ordnance batteries. The breaching drill's still there, and so are the big tank series, the Macarius and the Malcador and that Stormblade. Will be interesting to see what the Cyclops demolition vehicle does as well. They're just 25 points. Always fun little units with those little remote control bombs. For the Imperial Knights, Games Workshop still said that Forge World is going to be a bit more of a focus for them, alongside the Adeptus Custodes. All of their models have survived, and it looks like a lot of them have gone down in points. And it's kind of interesting that the Chaos Knight datasheets have slightly different points costs on a bunch of them. I guess that's probably going to mean that they're going to have different datasheet abilities, so that's why Chaos Knight Lancers cost different to Loyalist ones, I suppose. Will be interesting to see how they do the plastic rollout of Forge World Knights. They've announced that Lancer. We also saw the leaked sprue of, I believe it was the Acheron, the one with the flamer, so it seems likely that the other two will be coming as well. In any case, the entire Cerastus Knight series does seem to be drastically cut in points. Looks like they're going to be around about the same cost as the cheaper Questoris patterns for a lot of them. Looks like that could be very interesting to weigh them up against the Questoris datasheets. Hopefully this time round they actually put a bit more thought into the datasheets and actually have them on par with the Questoris, as opposed to just feeling like they're lagging behind with rules. The Moiraxes look like they're going to be the most expensive armigers at 170 points each. Hopefully their gun profiles make up for that. And the really big knights, the Asterius and the Porphyrion, they're still up a lot more expensive than even the Knight Dominus. The Porphyrion significantly cheaper than the Asterius. Again, hopefully they're at least going somewhere more towards usability. They were kind of underwhelming all round compared with the Knight profiles in 9th. While we're on Knights, I thought we'd jump ahead to Chaos Knights as well. Kind of interesting to see the small datasheet differences here. Looks like 2 of them are cheaper and 4 of them are slightly more expensive. The Lancer and Castigator are slightly cheaper if you fill them in Chaos. The Atropos, Acheron, Styrax and Megara are all slightly more expensive. No idea whether or not that's actually going to reflect their value to the army. I feel like with the indexes there's quite a lot more going on, having to factor in things like the Imperial Knights Feel No Pain and the Chaos Knights leadership shenanigans. I feel like if they are doing datasheets differently though with their points cost, then it will almost certainly be the datasheet rules that are altered. Can't really see them messing around too much with weapon profiles, and it doesn't look like it's just attachment buffs, as some of the datasheets cost the same. Otherwise, there's not really much else for the Imperium. The AdMech has theirs removed. The individual Space Marine Divergent chapters don't really get anything. The only other ones are the Grey Knights that get the Thunderhawk as well at a slightly decreased price. Not sure if that's partly to reflect not having Oath of Moment with the option for massive damage boosts. And interestingly, it still looks like they get their Land Raider Banisher with the slightly different guns. This one's 255 points, so it looks like it's quite a lot cheaper than the Land Raider Redeemer. I guess maybe it might not come with the top-mounted multi-melter, or maybe Games Workshop isn't particularly thinking that the Grav Cannon's worth as much as the Heavy Bolter. Still could be interesting though, as a cheaper Land Raider for squad delivery. Still mounting some massive flame cannons, though I guess Grey Knights might often just want to get there with their teleport tricks. Xenos next, and at first glance it looks like the scary Aeldari have retained all currently active datasheets. The Shadow Spectres are still here, they're now 16 points each, Irilith is 105, and out of the other datasheets, maybe some notable ones are the Wraithseer getting a fair bit cheaper. Looks like they're a similar sort of cost to the Wraith Lords, but they might have had their datasheets reduced in power to respect that. The Revenant Titan looks decently cheaper, that's now on par with the Warhound Titan at 1100 points. Again, just feasibly, that looks like it could actually be fielded in an army now, provided you focused it all around that. I have a feeling though it's probably not going to outcompete the Wraith Knights with those massive great big mortal wound shots. Probably the Skavik Wraith Knight is one to watch, particularly as you might already be overloading your opponent with Wraith Knights. They do seem to be one of the stronger datasheets of a very, very powerful index. I guess probably less interaction with the massive Fate Dice automatic 6s, but still just adding to general toughness and threat. Hornets could be kind of fun as well, individual little units running around making good use of the single rerolls that Aeldari get. They might get twin linked on the guns though, which could reduce that a little bit, already rerolling a wound roll. For Drukhari, the Reaper was recently taken away from the Forge World web store, so it looks like the only Forge World model is now the Tantalus. The Reaper was basically a Ravager sort of variant with D6 lance shots. The Tantalus remains, and is a bit more expensive, but has a big transport capacity. Could be interesting to see the stats on that thing. I feel like Drukhari skimmers with a whole bunch of shooting seems to be a surprisingly effective way to play the army. The Ravagers are definitely looking pretty nice for the cost at 95 points each. Necrons next, and it looks like they, the Orks and the Tau have all taken some datasheet losses going into 10th, but perhaps the most interesting thing out of these points costs are the Seraptic Heavy Constructs going down to 470 points. That's really quite a whopping drop down from 600, and I feel like really quite a lot of these really big monsters and super heavies have actually got pretty strong datasheets going into 10th edition. If their rules were written in a similar sort of style to the Wraith Knight and the Imperial Knights, could be a very interesting choice. At 470 points, they're not going to take up quite such a massive chunk of your army. Otherwise, the Tomb Sentinels went up slightly. Yeah, Canoptic Acantharites got decently cheaper, down to just 85 for 3 of them. And Lost to Legends are all flavours of pylons now. Kind of sad to have the Necron point defense big guns no longer active. And the Night Shroud Bomber has gone away as well, that one being an upgrade kit for the Nightside and Doomside. Not that bombers have particularly strong rules in 10th edition anyway. Games Workshop really has kept them out of the game a bit, due to the whole hover mode or turn up on turn 2 and don't bomb till turn 3 thing. For the Orks, the Gargantuan Squiggoth is 440 points. I feel like he's potentially interesting enough for the points cost perhaps. Fairly similar stats to things like an Imperial Knight Gallant maybe, but also a big transport capacity. Does look kind of fun to just slam one of those into enemy lines. Perhaps some of the most interesting things for the Orks are that boss on the warbike still seems to be here. It seemed that Forge World was retiring his model, so a lot of people thought that he'd be going into Legends. The points cost being featured here though probably implies not, and even alongside the Knob Bikers, who still seem to be here as well at 125 points, and the boss is 85. That does look quite nice. Will be interesting to have him as an alternative for the Death Killer Wartrite leading some bikes about. Otherwise, the Grot Tanks are 4 for 155. There's still the Mecha Dread and the Mega Dread here. The regular Squiggoth's 150, and the Big Track looks kind of interesting as an alternative transport at just 75 points. That's not really much different to the Truck. Kill Tank is slightly cheaper as well if you take the really big gun. Again, that could be one to watch. For the Orcs, some of the more obvious losses to Legends are Big Mech Bosgob, the Cannon Wagon, and the Custom Stomper. I guess if you've got one of those, then it's just the regular Stomper datasheets to represent it now. For the Tau Empire, I think the only datasheet they've really previewed for this was the Manta, and that is truly ridiculous in terms of points still, at 2,100. Kind of fun though as a casual flyer that can transport basically an entire army. I feel like the big suits have got some interesting enough points cost here, obviously datasheet dependent. The Supremacy armor is down to 685, again is looking a lot more in the realm of something that you might feasibly take in a 2,000 points list if the points were right. And both the Yavara and Ravana Riptide variants look kind of interesting. They'll be weighed up directly against the Riptide now, as they're 235 points, just the same as the big suit is. The stealth drones seem to have gone up even more. I feel like Games Workshop just don't really want you fielding individual drones these days, though I suppose the datasheet could have been massively improved for all we know. And Tetras basically seem the same as they were before, coming in squads of either 2 or 4 for 40 points each per model. For the Tau, they have lost some options. Hazard suits are basically no longer a thing, and that does decrease the crisis style spam that you could do with the loss of the bodyguard datasheet as well. Shah's Overlie, the unique commander as well, he seems to be gone. Again, I think both of those units were removed from the Forge World web store, so are probably going to Legends. Finally, for the Forge World points, we have the Tyranids as well. This section again has been one that's been gradually cut down, with various things going out of production in Forge World over the years, which has left to just 4 survivors from the Tyranid Forge World range: the Barbed and Scythe Hierodules, the Harridan and the Hierophant. Out of those, both the Harridan and the Hierophant have gone down slightly. The Hierodules both go up and cost the same at 305 points. Tyranids have taken a fair few losses in terms of removed datasheets. The Stone Crusher Carnifexes, which I guess you could just run as regular Carnifexes to be honest. The Sky Slasher Swarm variant of Rippers, that was kind of a shame as they did feel almost directly superior to Rippers in 9th edition at least. Same cost but better movement. The Dimecharon has gone away. Again, that's kind of a shame for him as he was a somewhat popular Forge World unit throughout 8th and 9th edition, jumping over terrain and providing some serious melee stats for his cost. I think people are hoping that the new Norna Mystery kit that Games Workshop has teased might actually be somewhat going to replace this guy. Finally, I feel like the Malanthrope will be missed as well. He was basically like the big Venomthrope. Previously was kind of useful for handing out a -1 to hit for a good chunk of your army. Maybe not impossible that he could get reincarnated in plastic at some point, but it appears that he's going to be gone to Legends for now. I guess Tyranids are going to have a big wave of plastic to come and at least replace or update some of this. I'm not sure I'd hold my breath on official replacements for these individual miniatures though I think there's probably a higher chance of Shrikes that got removed in days past. For all the Forge World updates, that's basically it. Maybe most notably, there's no Forge World points for Chaos Demons that had their 4 great big demons removed, plus a few supporting things like Korax Otterblight and things like that. Their models have been pulled from Forge World's web store, and now they've been pulled from rules as well. They'll probably get some Legends datasheets though, I would guess. It is kind of sad seeing the Chaos Space Marine range so bare. I can maybe understand things like the Contemptor and Leviathan if they were doing that to match the Loyalists. Seems kind of unnecessary to remove their demon engines though. Things like the Greater Brass Scorpion, the Decimator, and the Greater Blight Drone. I feel like all of those aren't necessarily any more heresy related than they are 40k related. Chaos Space Marines definitely lose demon engines and tend to use older technology as well. And it does just feel a little bit sad for the Chaos Marines in particular that they've had all those fancy Forge World toys removed when armies like Necrons, Aeldari, Orks, and Tyranids still get theirs. As mentioned earlier as well, the Adeptus Mechanicus have had their datasheets removed. The Titan Guard and Drill went to Legends. Pretty much the opposite of what a few people might have wanted, which might have been the Mechanicum type datasheets making ports to 40k to fill them on a bit more of a relic basis. Overall, I think a few interesting clues to the future there. I feel like provisionally some of the Adeptus Custodes datasheets are looking rather good based on those leaked rules that we saw in the last video. The Caladius and the Contemptor Achilles perhaps seem to stand out just from these points and their gun stats. I'll leave a link to the overview of the Custodes datasheets down in the video description. In any case, let me know your thoughts on the units. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly aim to keep track of Games Workshop's news and releases here on the channel. Finally, if you have been enjoying all these videos, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and that's how I can keep on making videos like this quite so regularly. If you're enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.